Constitution Center's Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Vince Stango.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2017 Liberty Medal ceremony, honoring a great American hero, U.S. Senator John McCain. Tonight's ceremony will begin at 7 o'clock. In the meantime, I'd like to take this opportunity to offer some thanks and to share a few special messages. As you know, the National Constitution Center inspires citizens as the only place where people across America and from around the world can come together to learn, debate, and celebrate the greatest vision of freedom, of human freedom in history, the U.S. Constitution. And we're honored to educate and inspire so many citizens about the meaning and importance of the U.S. Constitution. It's because of you that we can engage in this meaningful work. On behalf of Jeff Rosen and the entire team at the National Constitution Center, I want to thank all of you, our donors, partners, and visitors, our public officials, and our superb Board of Trustees for everything that you do to bring the U.S. Constitution to life. Now, there are some friends of the Constitution Center whose dedicated support helps to make a night like tonight possible. I'd like to invite them to join us on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Cynthia McLeod, Superintendent of Independence National Historical Park. Ira Lubert, Chairman Lubert Adler. Dan Fitzpatrick, President of Citizens Bank Mid-Atlantic. William R. Sasso, Chairman, Stradley Ronan. Doug DeVos, Chairman of the National Constitution Center's Executive Committee. Howard Schultz, Executive Chairman, Starbucks Coffee Company. And Dr. Amy Gutman, President of the University of Pennsylvania. So I'm sure that many of you want to share tonight's program with your friends on social media. And when you do, we invite you to use the hashtag Liberty Medal. Now, while we encourage you to use social media, we ask you to please silence your electronic devices, and I'll give you all a moment to do so now. Thank you. A few of our special guests this evening recorded messages of support for Senator McCain. We'd like to share those with you now. Please turn your attention to the screen behind me.
Welcome. I'm Ira Lubert, and I want to thank you for joining us as the National Constitution Center awards the 2017 Liberty Medal to a true American hero, John McCain. Our Constitution inspires us with the love of liberty and provides us with a blueprint for how to live as free women and men. But the Constitution alone, essential though it is, cannot secure our freedom. In our dangerous world, our best and bravest have to put their lives on the line to defend it. As a young man, John McCain did just that. In so doing, he modeled for all of us an unwavering devotion to the cause of liberty. All of us owe him a great debt of gratitude for this invaluable legacy. On behalf of Lubert Adler, I join my colleagues on the Board of Trustees of the National Constitution Center in celebrating the winner of the 2017 Liberty Medal, Senator John McCain.
Welcome. I'm Dan Fitzpatrick, President of Citizens Bank of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. I'm honored to join the National Constitution Center and all of you here today to pay tribute to a great American, Senator John McCain. When we think of Senator McCain, we think of two ideals, service and honor. From a young age, Senator McCain was called to serve, to give back. And throughout his life, he exemplifies what he called the sanctity of personal honor. As a naval officer in Vietnam, as a congressman, and as a U.S. Senator, a constant theme runs through John McCain's life: dedication to our country, our Constitution, and the preservation of liberty. Today, the National Constitution Center bestows the 2017 Liberty Medal on this exemplary man. On behalf of our CEO and trustee of the National Constitution Center, Bruce Van Saun, and all of our colleagues at Citizens Bank, I'm honored to join with all of you in celebrating this well-deserved award.
Good evening. I'm Bill Sasso, and it's a great honor to join the National Constitution Center and our board chair, Vice President Joe Biden, in paying tribute to Senator John McCain. Senator McCain began his career as a naval officer, and the years since he has been justly honored for his extraordinary heroism in that role. But Senator McCain displayed another kind of heroism in his political career after Vietnam. Our constitutional system depends on lawmakers who can put aside their partisan interests to promote the common good. Senator McCain never forgot this. Throughout his long legislative career, he strove to put his country over his party. Thank you for joining me, Stradley Ronan, and the National Constitution Center in conferring upon Senator John McCain a richly deserved honor, the 2017 Liberty Medal.
In just a few moments, our show will begin. Enjoy.
Good evening, and welcome to the National Constitution Center and the 2017 Liberty Medal Ceremony. Please welcome our 2017 Liberty Medal recipient, the Honorable John McCain. He is escorted by Jeffrey Rosen, President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Constitution Center, and Chairman of the National Constitution Center and the 47th Vice President of the United States, Joseph Biden. Please rise for the national anthem, performed by Midshipman Second Class Michael Mason, and the presentation of colors by the United States Army, Philadelphia Metro Recruiting Company, and the Naval Recruiting District, Philadelphia.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Constitution Center, Jeffrey Rosen.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the National Constitution Center. It is an honor to welcome you on this meaningful occasion as the National Constitution Center awards the 2017 Liberty Medal to Senator John McCain. Throughout his career, Senator McCain has put his devotion to the U.S. Constitution above faction or party. He is the kind of independent citizen statesman James Madison envisioned when he stressed that the U.S. Constitution created not a direct democracy, but a representative republic. Madison and the framers of the Constitution believed that direct democracies had led, in Greece and Rome, to rule by demagogues and the mob. By contrast, in a representative republic, Madison emphasized, citizens would delegate power to enlightened representatives, quote, a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interests of their country and whose patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice it to temporary or partial considerations. It's especially meaningful that Senator McCain will be awarded the Liberty Medal, accompanied by the chair of the National Constitution Center, Vice President Joe Biden. Vice President Biden served in the Senate with John McCain for more than 2 decades, and their willingness to work together on behalf of the United States of America represents a Madisonian ideal that is now under siege. Today, new populist forces and social media technologies are balkanizing citizens into filter bubbles and echo chambers, speeding up public discourse in the process. The result is polarizing our media and elected officials and threatening values of thoughtful deliberation and public reason in precisely the way the framers feared. That's why the National Constitution Center's mission of constitutional education is so urgently important. In April 1988, a year after he was sworn into the Senate, Senator McCain became a co-sponsor of the Bicentennial Heritage Act, which created the National Constitution Center. That act gave us an inspiring educational mission to disseminate information about the U.S. Constitution on a nonpartisan basis in order to increase awareness and understanding of the U.S. Constitution among the American people. 30 years later, increasing constitutional awareness and understanding is more necessary than ever. It is crucial that we bring together citizens of different perspectives on all media platforms to listen respectfully to constitutional arguments on all sides. We need to empower all Americans to educate themselves about the Constitution so that we, the people, can deliberate thoughtfully with each other and choose enlightened representatives like Senator McCain, who will deliberate with similar thoughtfulness rather than retreating into polarized camps. The future of liberty and democracy depends on constitutional education. As Jefferson said, democracy cannot survive both ignorant and free. The centerpiece of the Constitution Center's educational efforts is the online interactive Constitution. It's received nearly 12 million hits since it launched in 2015. You can click on any provision of the Constitution using this amazing online tool and find the leading conservative and liberal legal thinkers in America discussing what they agree about and what they disagree about. This wonderful platform is a model for the kind of thoughtful, multi-partisan deliberation that Madison considered essential to the preservation of freedom and democracy in America. With your help, we need to bring it to learners across America and around the globe. By spreading light and constitutional understanding, the National Constitution Center inspires all citizens to preserve, protect, and defend American liberty in the spirit of sacrifice and service exemplified by the heroic career of Senator McCain. Few among us will be called to the life of sacrifice and service that John McCain has devoted to the United States of America, but all of us are inspired by his example. On behalf of the National Constitution Center, for all you have done to preserve, protect, and defend liberty in America and across the globe, it's an honor to say thank you, Senator McCain.
John McCain's life has been all about fighting for freedom.
He is truly one of America's heroes.
The personification of courage and independence.
He has the guts, he has what it takes to stand up, to speak up.
If you could combine a cowboy with a scholar, that's who you've got.
John Sidney McCain III comes from a long legacy of service to country.
His grandfather was an admiral, his father was an admiral.
His family has served in every conflict since America's founding.
It dates back all the way to General George Washington's staff.
Senator McCain was born in August of 1936 at the Naval Air Station in the U.S.-controlled Panama Canal Zone, where his father was stationed.
My dad had just kind of intense admiration and respect for his dad. He was a very small man. I mean, he was 5'4" maybe, but his presence was stunning.
McCain's father was a submariner. His grandfather, a sailor who pioneered naval aviation strategy on aircraft carriers. As a boy, he admits a mix of pride in the family legacy and resentment that his life's course seemed preordained.
And there was never any other consideration other than he would go to the Naval Academy, which made him a little bit rebellious.
When he was 15, his parents sent him to Episcopal High School, a private boarding school in Alexandria, Virginia.
He had been to a lot of schools as they moved around from base to base, and it's pretty easy to know that this guy probably was quite a bit more worldly than the rest of us.
Bruce Reinhardt was on the football team and wrestling squad with McCain and remembers that even as a teenager, McCain was a nonconformist who pushed back against rules.
The school had a new boy system. It was called the rat system, not unlike what you'd find at the Naval Academy.
McCain says he was considered the worst rat because he frequently picked fights with his fellow students, challenged school authorities, and ignored the school's regulations.
Hence, he earned the nickname Punk, and I think he enjoyed that nickname.
He, on the one hand, could have taken an easy path through life. He was the son of an admiral, he was the grandson of an admiral, but he clearly wanted to make his own mark.
After 4 years in the Naval Academy and advanced flight training, McCain was eager to add, as he calls it, his own paragraph to the family legacy, with a combat tour in Vietnam.
The call to duty is what they're all about, and so he not only wanted to go, he asked to go.
At age 31 and a married father of 3, John McCain joined the squadron on the USS Forrestal as an A-4 pilot. And it was on the flight deck in late July of 1967 that he had his first real brush with death.
Dad was on deck. His plane was going to be the next one to launch.
A power surge triggered the accidental launch of a rocket across the ship's flight deck, striking a fuel tank and igniting a massive fire on a ship loaded with bombs.
They were sitting ducks there, and they were trying to offload these bombs into the water and trying to get the fire out.
So many men died that day, but he rolled off the nose of the aircraft into the fire and ran.
He always says how he's the luckiest guy he knows. I've always felt he's the luckiest and unluckiest guy.
After surviving the Forrestal, McCain could have gone home. Instead, he volunteered for another tour on the USS Oriskany, a carrier that had suffered its own major shipboard fire just a year earlier.
To him, it wasn't about being a pilot in a war. It was about serving his country. And he signed up to do that, and he was going to do it.
3 months later, McCain's plane was shot down in a bombing mission.
Then I found myself falling toward the middle of a small lake in the city of Hanoi with 2 broken arms, a broken leg, and an angry crowd waiting to greet me.
He'd broken his arms and leg on ejection. His captors broke his shoulder with smashing blows from a rifle butt, then dumped him in an empty cell at the infamous Hanoi Hilton.
We knew he had been captured, so we knew he was alive. As we learned later, he came very close to death a couple of times.
He was given medical treatment only after his captors learned his father was an admiral.
How is your food? It's not like Paris.
He was a potential propaganda piece because of my grandfather, and they were trying to exploit that to their advantage.
His jailers offered to grant him early release and a chance to escape his suffering.
He said, "I'm not leaving."
Code of conduct. You go home in the order of your shoot down.
McCain would later learn that the day he was to be sent home was the day his father was to be promoted commander of the entire Pacific Fleet.
Then they thought they would secure a public relations coup by releasing him back to the States.
He could have taken advantage of that, gotten out early. He stayed in line, did his duty, did the right thing.
How many people, given the choice, would stay true to their code, true to their brothers who were there in the North Vietnamese prison and refuse to go home?
I said that must have been a really hard decision, and as it turned out for my dad, it was not a hard decision.
His punishment for rejecting early release was 4 days of beatings.
They worked me over harder than they ever had before.
Cracking his ribs, breaking his teeth, and re-breaking his arm.
Ernest Hemingway has a famous line in Old Man and the Sea, "Man can be destroyed but not defeated." And every time I think of that, I think of John, because of his strong and relentless will to live, to serve, to fight for what he believes in.
His first 2 years as a POW, McCain was placed in solitary confinement.
It's a test of strength, of human dignity.
By the time he joined his fellow POWs, he weighed just over 100 pounds. His broken arms still useless.
They put me in a cell with 2 other Americans. I couldn't even feed myself. They did it for me. Those men saved my life.
The experience, McCain has said, changed him from a rebel without a cause to a maverick on a mission.
You're powerless. You're at the mercy of your captor. And the only thing you hold on to is your ability to be faithful to your country.
After 5.5 years, McCain was sent home in March of 1973. His time as a POW, he says, made him appreciate that America's freedom was an honor, and that with honor comes obligation. He retired from the Navy in 1981 and won a seat in Congress the following year.
He couldn't serve in the military anymore, so he went into politics.
As a member of the House and then the Senate, he's been a champion of veterans.
Someone who always had the backs of the men and women of the U.S. military, no matter what.
And when President Bill Clinton called for normalizing relations with Vietnam, McCain became a leader in the charge.
One of the 2 key people, John Kerry, was the other one.
He's made 22 trips to Vietnam.
We have to chase down every lead with respect to the potential that in America was still being held.
And there is something really striking about a man who spent 5.5 years in a prisoner of war camp, having then 22 times gone back.
We visited the Hanoi Hilton, and I will never forget, ever, the emotion of being shown the cell in which he spent a fair amount of time.
He now is someone who's also viewed by the Vietnamese as their best advocate in Washington.
Family and colleagues will tell you he's still very much the rebel.
He has a contrarian streak a mile wide.
I'm sure you've heard the fiery McCain as an adjective often used to describe Dad.
I said, you know, John, those guards who watched over you for over 5 years in North Vietnam are still going to group sessions all these years later trying to recover.
The same courage that John showed in Vietnam, he shows in Congress almost every week.
I remember one time I was getting some grief from local editorial boards and people because I was going after earmarks and egregious spending. And I was on a flight with him, and he came back to my seat. He put his finger right in my chest, and I thought, I'm really in for it now. And he said, "Don't give up. You're doing the right thing." That's meant more to me over the years than anything.
Senator McCain has been a role model for those of us who are younger senators. about how to be your own man.
When he talks, the room goes quiet. People always know that something important is going to be said.
What's so unusual about John McCain is that combination of willingness to be a maverick and a real concern to be effective, to make a difference. And that's a very rare combination.
If McCain got his straight speaking style from his mother,
An absolute dynamo. She's 105 now and is still going strong.
he got his tireless work ethic from his dad.
He's a tremendous worker. He always wants to be prepared and ready.
How he does it physically, I don't know. We saw interns just begging, I got to take a break, because they couldn't keep up with him.
John came back to the Senate right after the diagnosis of brain cancer, against the advice of his doctors.
Tough diagnosis to get, but an even tougher guy.
He's consumed with doing his duty.
He works like a sailor, he fights like a sailor, he swears like a sailor, and he is one of the greatest patriots I've ever met.
He recognizes the need for America to be a voice for those who don't have much of a voice.
Somebody asked him, what should the purpose of American foreign policy be? And he said, I can't think of a better answer to that than the Declaration of Independence. Every one of us on earth is created equal, and we've got the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
He has always put this country first in everything.
And now, please welcome the President of the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Amy Gutmann.
Good evening, everyone, and what a good evening it is. Good evening. We gather at the National Constitution Center to honor a man renowned for, among other things, his deep respect for constitutional knowledge and tradition, and his abiding bipartisanship. Two things in such short supply these days that we all had to visit a museum to see it on display, right? Now, in all seriousness, how very moving it is that the career-long Republican we celebrate tonight is going to be introduced by his good friend, an equally renowned Democratic Senator and United States Vice President Joe Biden. This is really a momentous evening. Such distinctively bipartisan friendship underscores why we so warmly celebrate this year's Liberty Medal recipient. On the occasion of awarding the Liberty Medal to this great patriot of our time, Benjamin Franklin had the perfect words, of course. For those of you who don't know it, he's the founder of the University of Pennsylvania. After Britain imposed punitive restrictions of liberty on the American colonies, Franklin declared, "They who give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." Nobody knows the truth of Franklin's words better than this year's recipient of the Liberty Medal. For prisoners of war, concepts of safety and liberty cease to be abstractions. The suffering they experience could defeat all but the strongest of wills. The man we honor tonight possesses such will. The man we honor tonight exemplifies our society's highest ideals with the deepest imaginable reserve of courage and conviction. He has devoted his life to securing and expanding liberty for people everywhere. We award the Liberty Medal tonight to a leader who, by virtue of both his ideals and his actions, not only crosses party lines and national borders, he transcends them. He is a man who has focused his life not on the tears that sunder, but on the ties that bind. He is an exemplary American who routinely forgoes what is expedient to pursue what is just and what is right. Our recipient shares with those who have come before him a lifelong devotion to that ultimate and noblest of human pursuits, liberty. The National Constitution Center was built to strengthen our pursuit of that shared purpose of liberty. Tonight, we are so proud to continue that work by celebrating a national leader of immense distinction. He is among our longest-serving statesmen in the U.S. Senate. He is a congressman before that and a naval pilot before that. Throughout a lifetime of service to country, to others, and to his own principles, he has been a warrior for our freedom. In uniform, he defended liberty. In government, he upholds it. In daily life, he adheres to it. At a time when people's faith in institutions and in many individuals has eroded, countless many look up to the man we honor tonight. We look to him as a moral voice, straight-talking and upright, honestly imperfect, and all the braver for it. The life he has lived inspires us and gives us hope, no matter what our party affiliation. Serving tirelessly in the cause of liberty, he is above all a person of honor. We see in him what we so fervently desire to see at work at our nation and around the world. Tonight, we honor liberty, tied to the utmost of courage, as we celebrate and we salute our senator and our hero, Senator John McCain. Thank you, and thank you all for honoring this great public servant.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you for your invaluable leadership and collaboration with the National Constitution Center. It's now my privilege to introduce a visionary patriot and great friend of America's veterans. He appreciates what Senator McCain and his fellow veterans have sacrificed in providing for the common defense and protecting the Constitution. Howard Schultz is the visionary founder, former CEO, and current executive chairman of Starbucks. As you're about to hear, Howard has a special passion for the well-being of America's veterans. In 2011, veterans sparked his conscience about personal responsibility. As a result, Howard and his wife, Sherry Schultz, began to educate themselves about the 1% of Americans who have served in the U.S. military. In 2013, Starbucks pledged to hire 10,000 veterans and military spouses in the next 5 years. When the company met that goal a year and a half ahead of schedule, Starbucks pledged to hire 25,000 vets by 2025. The following year, Howard and Sherry's Family Foundation launched Onward Veterans, which empowers post-9/11 vets and their families in their transition to civilian life. And recognizing that many vets struggle with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, the Schultz Family Foundation pledged an initial $30 million to remedy and study these afflictions. With the invaluable work of the Schultz Family Foundation, Howard and Sherry continue to change the national narrative about transitioning veterans and military families who have sacrificed so much to protect America. Ladies and gentlemen, for his service to America's veterans, please join me in thanking and welcoming Howard Schultz.
Jeffrey, thank you for that warm introduction. Vice President Biden, Senator McCain, ladies and gentlemen, it is a profound honor to stand here before you this evening. I also stand here with immense humility and emotion. As an entrepreneur and a business leader, I have long known that my life's journey was made possible by the promise of freedom conceived by the brave men and women who have fought to preserve that promise for centuries. Yet never in my lifetime have I been so mindful and at the same time so passionate about the shared responsibility we all have to live up to the ideals in which that promise was conceived. Consider what happened right here at Independence Hall more than 2 centuries ago. Far-sighted statesmen of clashing beliefs came together in common purpose. Values and rules of law were fiercely debated, while bold yet pragmatic principles informed the creation of our enduring Constitution. Among those principles was the need for individual and state sacrifice so the country could achieve a higher purpose of unity. Also among those principles was a call for a spirit of amity, so cooperation and collaboration could bridge ideological divides. Our founding fathers were not perfect, but as we sit here tonight, how can we not be in awe of past leaders who invoke such simple wisdoms despite the complexities of their time? In the same vein, how can we not have immense gratitude for a leader of our time, for a sailor and a statesman who sits among us now because his life story embodies the very heroic, virtuous principles of his father, of his grandfather, and of our founding fathers. Senator McCain, I stand here in awe of America's shared heritage and with the utmost respect and gratitude for you, sir. Here tonight, history lives among us. John McCain is one of millions of Americans who have sworn allegiance to our Constitution. He first took the oath as a rambunctious 17-year-old in 1954 as he entered the United States Naval Academy. He repeated that oath many times when he was commissioned as a naval officer, when he was elected to represent the great state of Arizona in Congress, and each of the 6 times he was elected to the United States Senate. Senator, as a citizen who has admired you from afar, I must believe that every time you took the oath of allegiance to the Constitution, you were also pledging your heart to our country. More than an oath of loyalty, you pledged an oath of love. With that in mind, the honor of speaking here tonight has given me an opportunity to further appreciate what it means to love something as you love our country and the responsibilities that come with it. Tonight, I would like to speak about such love and responsibility in the context of both our country and Senator McCain's life. Let me begin with a story we all know. In 1968, John McCain's Navy jet was shot down. The force of that ejection broke his right leg and both his arms. We recall how he was taken prisoner by the North Vietnamese. We wince to remember how his fractures were set without anesthesia and the additional damage doctors inflicted upon his body. And we ask ourselves, would we have the mettle, the fortitude to endure such pain, or the sheer will to survive in such horrific circumstances? These traits alone are worthy of our respect and our admiration. Yet it is another part of this story that for me showcases the incredible depth of the senator's character. Many of you know that our nation's military has a code of honor during wartime. American prisoners go home in the order in which they were captured. Those held the longest leave first. Less than a year after John McCain was captured, he received a stunning offer. He was free to go home to America. The offer came soon after his father was named commander of the American forces in the Pacific. The young McCain knew that his early release would be a propaganda coup for the North Vietnamese. He summoned the courage of his convictions and refused his freedom. His jailers warned that if he stayed, he would suffer dire consequences. Yet still, this young man volunteered to endure the horrors of torture and the possibility of death because he understood what it meant to love his country and the depth of sacrifice that comes with it. Hearing this story again, it is easy to see a brave, honorable warrior, but we must also see a true patriot whose selfless sacrifices reveal the same duty to country that our founding fathers believed in. In the years that followed his 5 years in captivity, his love of country manifested itself in another form of public service. In Congress, Senator McCain's conscience and willingness to put country over party have helped to preserve the democracy we have all inherited. I'm speaking of his long-standing belief to reform the role of money in politics. I'm speaking of his unwavering moral authority to ensure human treatment of all prisoners of war. I'm speaking of his unyielding support for the brave men and women of our military and his ongoing efforts to ensure they come home to the gratitude, to the respect, and the opportunity they deserve. And I'm speaking of the moments that he has really taken great political risk to determine and demonstrate the courage of conviction on the Senate floor, most recently with his vote not to dismantle the Affordable Care Act in haste. Can we hear that one more time? In reviewing Senator McCain's legislative body of work, it is easy to see a maverick. I see a true statesman. Like our founding fathers, Senator McCain is a leader willing to put the well-being of the country above his own interest. His love of country also shines in his ability to look beyond partisan differences. As an example, Senator McCain's uncommon friendship with Mo Udall comes to mind. Congressman Udall was a liberal icon, yet he reached out to a young Republican from his state as a friend and a mentor. The two men developed a close friendship that lasted until Udall's death from Parkinson's disease. Although Udall had once been among the most powerful leaders in Washington, almost none of his former colleagues came calling as he's laying ill at a veterans hospital not far from the Capitol. But it was Senator McCain who visited quite often. Senator, you would arrive at the hospital with newspaper clips, you would sit at your friend's bedside even when he was no longer conscious, and you would read to him. Just as Mo reached out to you in the beginning, you reached out to him in the end, with empathy and with true compassion. Hearing this story, it is once again, it's so clear of the unique and unusual man we are speaking about and what a dear friend he was to Mo Udall. But we must also see a man with a desire to embrace people's humanity regardless of their politics. This is no small feat in today's vitriolic halls of our governance and the uncivil corridors of our country. Senator McCain is a man of strong conviction, yes, but he also embodies the spirit of amity that helped our founding fathers find common ground. Leaders of Senator McCain's ilk not only look beyond political difference, they also look beyond the past. I ask all of us to reflect back to the physical and emotional horrors that a young pilot suffered as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. Now consider where we are today. The United States and Vietnam are nations that exchange tourists, trade, and cultures. This reconciliation would never have occurred had Senator McCain not found it within himself to extend the hand of friendship to his former adversaries and to work closely with President Clinton and Senator John Kerry, a Democratic peer, to establish diplomatic relations between two countries once at war. His efforts were a model of cooperation and forgiveness. If John McCain was able to look beyond a brutal past, so too could America. As we recall John McCain's role in our reconciliation with Vietnam, we see an impassioned torchbearer of American values. But we must also see a man who was willing to open his heart and his mind with the same foresight and collaboration that our founding fathers called upon as they designed the country's path forward. It is easy to recount the tales of great men, but it is much harder to follow in the footsteps of greatness. Yet every generation needs leaders capable of such feats. Our democracy remains a great experiment. All of us must see ourselves as her innovators as well as her protectors. That is why founding fathers never die. They exist in memory, but also in practice. You, Senator McCain, are a founding father of our time. You are a man who fights to preserve a nation with courage, compassion, gallantry, decency, and humanity. Every Independence Day, this mall is filled with Americans who come to celebrate the birth of our nation. Millions of others spend the day with family and friends. John McCain, however, has his own deeply held tradition. For 10 of the past 11 years, he has celebrated July 4th with American troops serving overseas. He makes these trips without a hint of obligation. Being among men and women in uniform is a sincere joy for him. His face lights up. There's a bounce to his step. On Independence Day, he has said there is no place he'd rather be. Those trips and all he does in service to our nation often keep him from family and home. To Cindy and the 7 McCain children, on behalf of all Americans, our gratitude for your sacrifice is an extraordinary opportunity to say thank you to the entire McCain family. In sharing your beloved husband and father with the rest of us, we feel your love of country. Senator, you hail from uncommon stock. Your grandfather served our Navy his entire adult life. Your father, Jack, entered the Naval Academy at age 16 and spent 41 years in uniform. Both were remarkable wartime heroes. You too humble us with your service. You have worn the cloth of the nation for most of your adult life. Yours is an uncommon love and commitment to country, a fidelity to flag with no peer in modern life. John Sidney McCain III, Captain, United States Navy, recipient of the Silver Star, recipient of the Legion of Merit, recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross, recipient of the Purple Heart, United States Senator, hero, statesman. Senator McCain, there are some who question what this nation has become. They wonder about our commitment to our founding values, our resolve, and our love of our fellow Americans. Perhaps they do not know where to look. Looking at the man we honor here tonight, I am comforted and confident in our potential as a united nation to live up to the best of our past, to put forth the best of ourselves, and to forge a future worthy of all Americans, especially great Americans who inspire us like John McCain. Thank you very much.
This place is important. The work we do is important.
In late July, returning to the Senate after surgery, John McCain took to the floor to articulate his philosophy of governance.
We've been spinning our wheels on too many important issues because we keep trying to find a way to win without help from across the aisle. What have we to lose by trying to work together to find those solutions?
He told them exactly what they needed to hear, and that is the partisanship has got to stop.
And he was saying, let's go back to the regular order. Well, what does that mean? It means that there are committees in the Senate. They have Republicans and Democrats on them. They work out the problems.
One of the biggest values that John adds to the Senate is institutional memory of how the Senate used to operate when people worked together across the aisle.
Ronald Reagan used to say, I'd rather have 80% of something than 100% of nothing. I think that's the way John McCain feels.
It demonstrates a model of service and a desire to make government work and a desire to maintain America's global leadership that I think is worthy of emulation.
A true statesman of the Senate, John McCain has led efforts on bipartisan legislation throughout his career.
He and I would sit in a room with the Gang of Eight. He led the Republican side, I led the Democratic side, for hours each day, days, weeks, and months. His persistence in making sure that we could come up with a bill that would get support of both Democrats and Republicans was amazing.
John McCain, I found, was a man of courage, not only in Vietnam, but he's been really quite a courageous guy in Congress.
We've now served together for 30 years. I've been on the same side and I've been on opposite sides. He's a fierce opponent, but also a loyal friend.
There was no better example of that than his friendship with Ted Kennedy. They would fight like cats and dogs on the floor, and then when they came off the floor, they were the best of friends. That's what true democracy is about.
McCain's wife, Cindy, credits much of her husband's legislative success to another maverick.
When John was a freshman congressman, Mo Udall took him under his wing.
Arizona Democrat Mo Udall was one of the most well-known members of Congress.
He's the one that came to John, the freshman Republican, and said, let's work together. That taught John a great deal.
We are an important check on the powers of the executive.
In his speech to the Senate, McCain didn't just implore his colleagues to come together. He defended the constitutional role of Congress as envisioned by the Founding Fathers.
Whether or not we are of the same party, we are not the president's subordinates. We are his equal.
He challenges us in the Senate. He pushes us to move past partisanship, to listen to each other, and to try and do right by the people who hired us.
He's been a role model and an example for all of us.
He's a fighter, a warrior for what is right, for what is fair and just.
John shares that belief that we've got to get back to the basics of leadership and the basics of the Constitution, because it's that respect for our country that's going to allow us to heal the wounds of Vietnam, the wounds of civil rights, the wounds of most recent times.
He approaches every issue. What is in the best interest of the country? What is the best outcome that can be achieved? And to me, that's the hallmark of a great public servant.
I don't think there's anyone else I know in America that is more deserving of this honor than John McCain.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 47th Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thank you very much. I'm assuming you're standing because you're cold and you'd like to stretch. Howard Schultz is going to come up and repeat his speech. Howard, that was really, really, really good. For real. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply honored to be here tonight as part of the night. Serving this year as the chair of the National Constitution Center Board of Trustees has afforded me many privileges, but none greater than the opportunity to recognize and celebrate the extraordinary, exemplary service to our nation of my dear friend. My mom, and I met John's mom and he knew my mom. My mom had an expression from the time I was a kid. She'd say, Joey, look at me. Look in my eyes. And I'm not exaggerating. My word is abiding. She'd say, look at me. So remember, you are defined by your courage and you're redeemed by your loyalty. That was her code. You are defined by your courage and you're redeemed by your loyalty. Courage and loyalty. I can think of no better description of the man we're honoring tonight, my friend John McCain. As I said, my mom knew John and respected him deeply. She said, which I never told John, she was one of 5 children from Scranton, 4 brothers, all served in the military, all in World War II. Her number 2 brother, and Bobby Casey knows this because we lived only several blocks from one another in Greenwich, he's Dad and I. Her number 2 brother was Ambrose Finnegan, who still is remembered in Scranton as a leader. He was shot down and his body was never found in Papua New Guinea. And she used to talk about every time something come up about John, how he reminded her of her brother Ambrose. She thought Ambrose, and she knew John, was the embodiment of courage and loyalty. We all know John's story. You've heard it tonight. We've seen it tonight. You know about his grandparents, his father, how he was called to duty in wartime, his incredible heroism. You know, on October 26th, 1967, 50 years ago this month, when his plane was shot down, and damn, it's hard to remember, John, 50 years, God almighty. I was a mere child. I think I was in 3rd grade. I don't remember for sure. But you know, the infamous Hanoi Hilton. You know, as you know and you've heard time and again, and John knows and still bears the scars of the brutal beatings and the damage done to him. After about 8 months, you also know about the offer of release. I have had the opportunity as Vice President to sit on the stage with the President and confer a number of medals of honor. I'm sure it's occurred, but I cannot think of anyone that I'm aware of, I'm sure it's occurred, who, given the opportunity, after knowing, not having to guess, Mr. Mayor, knowing what it meant to stay in that prison, not having to be threatened and wonder what was coming, knowing what would happen, given the opportunity to leave, no matter what the code was. Imagine. I want you to think about it. Imagine in real terms. Again, not having to wonder what he would face by refusing to leave, knowing the excruciating pain and isolation. And he stayed. He stayed. That meant he spent almost 5 more years in that hellhole of captivity. Inhumane conditions. 1,967 days. 1,967 days. You've all had pain. You've all had suffering. We've all had it in our lives, personally in our families. And you know how sometimes just getting up one day at a time, just putting one foot in front of the other and facing whatever that pain, mental or physical. As I said, I've been privileged to meet a fair number of heroes in my life. Like John, I've been in and out of Afghanistan and Iraq over 35 times. I've had the honor of printing silver stars on people in the FOB up in the upper Konar Valley. I've seen these kids, but I don't ever remember seeing someone who's kept his wits and senses about him. I remember when you were released, John, we all do, but I remember I was a senator only 4 months. It was March 14th, 1973. And I remember getting off that plane, pal. I didn't know you, but I remember that salute we saw here tonight. I remember how you were greeted and how you greeted, and how you made no distinction between you and all the rest of your fellow POWs at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. Folks, seeing that handsome young flyer who pushed beyond the bounds of human endurance come out on the other side, still standing, still proud, as my mother would say, still unbowed. I thought to myself, my God. And I remember talking with my friend Ted Kaufman, who you ended up serving with. He was my chief of staff, a fine guy. I remember us sitting watching and saying, someday I want to meet that guy, never expecting to be able to do it. You know, we have an expression in the Senate, you have to excuse the point of personal privilege. I realize what I'm talking about is personal. But remarkably, John chose to remain in the Navy. He had an awful lot of other opportunities. But he had chosen a life of service. And to him, duty always dictated what to do. And he stayed. You can imagine my surprise when in 1977, I did meet Captain John McCain, Senate Liaison Officer of the Naval Legislative Office. I was by far the youngest member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And I got an opportunity to travel all over the world. And like John, I've met every major world leader without exception since 1976. And in the beginning, one of the most consequential days of my career, and we all look back on our careers and think of those things and moments that had an impact on how your career moved forward. I not only got to work with John McCain, I got to know him. I got to know an awful lot about him, and he got to know an awful lot about me. We traveled hundreds of thousands of miles together. We got to know each other's families. Sitting on my lawn in Wilmington having a picnic with his family when he was still in the Navy. My sons, Beau Biden, Army, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, other service, other medals he was awarded. Looked at John from the time he was a high school kid with nothing but absolute raw admiration. My son Hunter got to know John personally. They got to talk to him. They took the measure of the man, and they got to learn from him. They really cared about you, John. I didn't know you know that. John and I would travel the world together. As I said, he jokes, he said he carried my bags. The son of a gun never carried my bags. He was supposed to carry my bags, damn it, but he never carried my bags. He was a young liaison officer. I was a young senator. Whether we were going to Germany or China, whenever I went, with notable exceptions, I asked John to come with me. And in many of those so-called CODELs, congressional delegations, back in the days when we liked each other and talked to each other, we used to travel together, Democrat and Republican, and our spouses. In many of those, Jill was along with me as well. She got to know and love John as well, and I think he loves her too. Traveling together with our wives was a tradition we kept up when John was later elected to the United States Senate himself. I never saw him just as a liaison officer. I pulled him in. I sought his advice. I'd be meeting with world leaders, and I'd ask John before I went in, what do you think, John? This is what I'm going to say. You think it makes sense, John? This is what I'm thinking. He not only became a friend, he became an advisor. And a little later on, I think maybe I served the same role for John when he was thinking about running. We talked for hours about the state of the world, about specific assignments, about our families, about what we wanted to do with our lives. I learned a hell of a lot about this man. And then we talk about what we're going to do, how we were thinking about what we're going to do. And John would talk about maybe he was going to go back to Arizona, go to Arizona and get involved in politics. And to the chagrin of some of my Democratic friends, I strongly encouraged John to do it. Because I knew when he ran for the House, it didn't surprise me at all that he won. It didn't surprise me when he ran for the Senate and won. It just pleased me because we got to serve together. Even though that same period of time, as John said, a lot of the Khmer Rouge was elected from the House and came over. That's another story. But it didn't surprise me when he became leader of his party. It didn't surprise me when he sought the nomination for president, because I thought from the beginning he had that capacity. I thought then, in 2000, he should have been the nominee. From my perspective, it all pointed in that direction from the very beginning. John will remember I called him after a couple of vicious attacks on him in South Carolina. And I offered to help him. I said, John, where do you want me? Pick the town, the city, the place, and I will testify to your character. And in classic John, he said, Joe, I think that hurt me more than it would help, but thanks. Remember that, John? And boy, was my team angry as hell with me because I made it known I was prepared to do it. But I'll tell you what did surprise me. I didn't expect that, and it caused me some consternation, although I was proud to be picked as vice president and serve with President Obama. I didn't expect that someday John and I would be on opposing tickets in 2008. But never once did I ever say anything that wasn't positive about John during that campaign. I never made any secret about John being my friend, although I didn't talk about it too much, not as a joke, because it would have hurt him. Not a joke. John, do you remember, John and I used to, in debates in the 90s, we'd go over and sit with one another. Literally sit next to each other on either the Democratic or Republican side of the floor. And I knew something had changed, John, and so did you, coincidentally. And Bobby, and you won't remember this, neither you or my colleague from Delaware would know this. But we both got into our caucuses and we chastised by the leadership in both our caucuses. Why were we talking with one another and sit with one another, showing such friendship in the middle of debates? This was after the Gingrich Revolution in the 90s. They didn't want us sitting together. That's when things began to change, not between John and me, but things began to change. But for John, it was always duty, honor, country. That's John. John understands what it means to sacrifice for what you believe in, to put the greater good ahead of personal feelings. President Kennedy said, moral courage in politics is a rarer commodity than courage on the battlefield. John has shown the moral courage. He's a man who was terrorized, victimized, abused for 5.5 years. And then as U.S. Senator, as was pointed out, he joined John Kerry in normalizing relationships with Vietnam. Always country first. Always country first. You know, here's what John said in 1995. He said, we have looked back in anger at Vietnam for too long. John saying, I cannot allow whatever resentment I incurred during my time in Vietnam to hold me from doing what is clearly my duty. Everybody talks about these virtues, but this is what the guy did. This is not only what he said. Duty, duty, duty. It's the marrow running through that solid steel spine of this guy. It was makes him such a formidable opponent and such a fierce friend. John and I have been with one another and together, and we've been against one another. Now, as you've all observed, neither one of us have a temper. Neither one of us ever lose our cool. But boy, oh boy. But as I've said, and John knows, even after our toughest fights, John's saying to me, call me and say, you know, Biden should be taken off the ticket. And then he called me to say, I didn't really mean that. I don't know what the hell made me say that. I've said this before because John and I have been given several awards together lately about bipartisanship, and we don't understand why you should get an award for bipartisanship, by the way. But I said this publicly before. I know if I called John in the middle of the night, even after the most bitter debate we could have, and said, John, I'm at 7th and Vine in St. Louis. I can't explain why, but I need you to come now for me. He'd get on the plane and he'd go. I guarantee you. And so would I for him. We've always been willing, when we thought the other guy was right, to cross the aisle and lock arms. It's good for the country. The part we didn't talk about, and I'm not going to take your time tonight, but I want to just state it for the record. John's a man of significant intellect, deep conviction, and unmatched character. And if you allow me to point a personal privilege again, we used to say in the Senate, and I want to say, John, how much your example of service and duty, courage and loyalty inspired my beau in his decision as an Army National Guard captain, later major, to give up his Attorney General seat, turn it over to a Republican to get permission to be able to go to Iraq for a year because his unit was going. John, when he received his cancer diagnosis, he also found strength in the courage you've demonstrated throughout your whole life. And I'm sure he'd not been surprised at all that after your diagnosis, you took to the Senate floor to remind us all of us who would choose to hold office, Democrats and Republicans alike, what our responsibility is, first to the nation. Responsibility that extends beyond ourselves, our parties. You once again felt that clarion call to duty, John. You extended it in turn to everyone around you. You said, what greater cause could we hope to serve than helping America be strong, aspiring, international beacon of liberty and a defender of the dignity of all human beings and the right to freedom and justice? What greater cause? You know, that's what it's always been for 4 decades. What greater cause? I personally benefit from having John McCain, both as a confidant, a counselor, and a friend. For even longer, our nation has benefited from John's selflessness and unwavering service. So now, John, to paraphrase Hemingway, was spoken to earlier, we grow stronger in all our broken parts. John, you've been broken many times, physically and otherwise, and you've always grown stronger. But what you don't really understand, in my humble opinion, is how much courage you give the rest of us looking at you. It matters. So now, John, with your powerful words ringing in our ears and your example before us, a life of tireless work to, quote, secure the blessings of liberty to the people the world over, it is my great pleasure to present you with the National Constitution Center's 2018 Liberty Medal. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeffrey Rosen. Where are you, Jeff?
Thank you, Vice President Biden, for those moving and significant words. Thank you for your service as chair of the Constitution Center, and it's now my great pleasure and honor to invite the Vice President to award the 27 Liberty Medal to John McCain.
I'm not going to put it around his neck because he gets animated and I'm worried it's going to hurt him speaking.
I'm going to say these words. Senator McCain, you have honorably served your country as a war hero. You have upheld the ideals of the United States Constitution as a statesman of the Senate and as a patriotic leader. And you have preserved, protected, and defended liberty at home and around the globe. For your life of sacrifice and service, it is the greatest honor for the National Constitution Center to award you the 2017 Liberty Medal.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Joe, my old dear friend. Thank you, Joe, my old dear friend, for those mostly undeserved kind words. Vice President Biden and I have known each other for a lot of years now, more than 40 if you're counting. We knew each other back when we were young and handsome and smarter than everyone else, but were too modest to say so. Joe was already a senator, and I was the Navy's liaison officer to the Senate. My duties included, as he mentioned earlier, escorting Senate delegations on overseas trips, and in that capacity I supervised the delegation's luggage, which could require now and again, when no one of lower rank was available for the job, that I carry someone else's bag. Once or twice, that turned out to be the young senator from Delaware. I've resented it ever since. Joe has heard me joke about that before. I hope he has heard, too, my profession of gratitude for his friendship and love these many years. It's meant a lot to me. We served in the Senate together for over 20 years during some eventful times, as we pass from young men to the fossils who appear before you this evening. We didn't always agree on the issues. We often argued, sometimes passionately, but we believed in each other's patriotism and the sincerity of each other's convictions. We believed in the institution we were privileged to serve in. We believed in our mutual responsibility to help make the place work and to cooperate in finding solutions to our country's problems. We believed in our country and in our country's indispensability to international peace and stability and to the progress of humanity. And through it all, whether we argued or agreed, Joe was good company. You all know he is good company. So thank you, old friend, for your company and your service to America. Thank you, too, to the National Constitution Center and everyone associated with it for this award. Thank you for that video and for all the too generous compliments paid to me this evening. I'm aware of the prestigious company the Liberty Medal places me in. I'm humbled by it, and I'll try my best not to prove too unworthy of it. Some years ago, I was present at an event where an earlier Liberty Medal recipient spoke about America's values and the sacrifices made for them. It was 1991, and I was attending the ceremony commemorating the 50th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The World War II veteran, estimable patriot and good man, President George Herbert Walker Bush, gave a moving speech at the USS Arizona Memorial. I remember it very well. His voice was thick with emotion, as he neared the end of his address. I imagine he was thinking not only of the brave Americans who lost their lives on December 7, 1941, but of the friends he had served with and lost in the Pacific, where he had been the Navy's youngest aviator. "Look at the water here, clear and quiet," he directed. "One day, what now seems another lifetime, it wrapped its arms around the finest sons any nation could ever have, and it carried them to a better world." He could barely get out the last line. May God bless them, and may God bless America, the most wondrous nation on earth. The most wondrous land on earth indeed. I've had the good fortune to spend 60 years in service to this wondrous land. It's not been perfect service, to be sure, and there were probably times when the country might have benefited a little less of my help. But I've tried to deserve the privilege as best I can, and I've been repaid 1,000 times over with adventures, with good company, with the satisfaction of serving something more important than myself, of being a bit player in the extraordinary story of America. And I am so grateful. What a privilege it is to serve this big, boisterous, brawling, intemperate, striving, daring, beautiful, bountiful, brave, magnificent country. With all our flaws, all our mistakes, with all the frailties of human nature, as much on display as our virtues, with all the rancor and anger of our politics, we are blessed. We are living in the land of the free, the land where anything is possible, the land of the immigrant's dream, the land with the storied past forgotten in the rush to the imagined future, the land that repairs and reinvents itself, the land where a person can escape the consequences of a self-centered youth and know the satisfaction of sacrificing for an ideal, the land where you can go from aimless rebellion to a noble cause and from the bottom of your class to your party's nomination for president. We are blessed, and we've been a blessing to humanity in turn. The international order we helped build from the ashes of World War and that we defend to this day has liberated more people from tyranny and poverty than ever before in history. This wondrous land has shared its treasures and ideals and shed the blood of its finest patriots to help make another better world. And as we did so, we made our own civilization more just, freer, more accomplished, and prosperous than the America that existed when I watched my father go off to war on December 7th, 1941. To fear the world we have organized and led the 3/4 of a century, to abandon the ideals we have advanced around the globe, to refuse the obligations of international leadership and our duty to remain the last best hope of earth for the sake of some half-baked, spurious nationalism cooked up by people who would rather find scapegoats than solve problems. Is as unpatriotic as an attachment to any other tired dogma of the past that Americans consigned to the ash heap of history. We live in a land made of ideals, not blood and soil. We are the custodians of those ideals at home and their champion abroad. We've done great good in the world. That leadership has had its costs. but we have become incomparably powerful and wealthy as we did. We have a moral obligation to continue in our just cause, and we would bring more than shame on ourselves if we don't. We will not thrive in a world where our leadership and ideals are absent. We wouldn't deserve to. I'm the luckiest guy on earth. I have served America's cause, the cause of our security and the security of our friends, the cause of freedom and equal justice, all my adult life. I haven't always served it well. I haven't even always appreciated what I was serving. But among the few compensations of old age is the acuity of hindsight. I see now that I was part of something important that drew me along in its wake, even when I was diverted by other interests. I was, knowingly or not, along for the ride as America made the future better than the past. And I've enjoyed it, every single day of it, the good ones and the not so good ones. I've been inspired by the service of better patriots than me. I've seen Americans make sacrifices for our country and our causes, and for people who were strangers to them, but for our common humanity. Sacrifices that were much harder than the service ever asked of me. And I've seen the good they've done, the lives they've freed from tyranny and injustice, the hope they encouraged, the dreams they made achievable. May God bless them. May God bless America and give us the strength and wisdom, the generosity and compassion to do our duty for this wondrous land and for the world that counts on us. With all its suffering and danger, the world still looks to the example and leadership of America to become another better place. What greater cause could anyone ever serve? Thank you again for this honor. I'll treasure it.
John, congratulations on receiving the Liberty Medal. You have devoted your life to defending the Constitution and upholding the values of our democracy, and for that, we all owe you a great debt of gratitude.
Senator McCain's life is a life of fighting and defending liberty for all. He is so deserving of this medal.
He's a man of compassion, conviction, and courage, and his voice and leadership are needed in the Senate today as much as ever. John, Laura, and I thank you from the bottom of our hearts for dedicating your life's work to advancing the cause of liberty. We thank the National Constitution Center for honoring this fine man, and we send our very best wishes to Cindy and the entire McCain family.
Please welcome the United States Naval Academy Glee Club under the direction of Dr. Cindy Bauschbies.
Skies for
Good night, and thank you for attending the 2017 Liberty Medal ceremony.